Today on the MrMaple Show podcast, Collector's Corner, Tim and Sean discuss. Hey, wait, that's me.
Howdy, and welcome to the MrMaple Show podcast. We really appreciate all you listeners out there. Make sure you find us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. It helps other people find us. Today, we've got a Collector's Corner with our very own Sean Richardson.
How's everybody doing? Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Now, Sean has been doing a lot of different projects for us. He's the guy who often edits the podcast in the background that Matt and I film. He's also been running the Buckholz Nursery YouTube channel with going through all the blogs. Tell us a little bit about that, Sean.
So going through Talon's blogs, the Floral Wonder blog, y'all should check it out on the Buckholz YouTube channel. But I'm just going through his blogs and reading them off, narrating them for him. And, you know, y'all should really check it out because Talon, as creative and as talented as he is as a nurseryman, the dude can write.
That he can. And that's one of the most interesting things is hearing the history behind Buckholz Nursery. And you've actually turned that blog that's on YouTube also into a podcast.
Correct. You can also check it out. So just like you get on here on any major streaming platform, you can find the Buckholz Nursery podcast. So you can listen to all his blogs in an audio form, kind of like an audiobook.
I mean, I know all the time I make an excuse and I don't find the time to go through and read every single blog, but I can actually plug in the podcast and listen to it and hear the history behind some of these cool plants that Talon has made famous worldwide.
And you know, we sit here and we've done the podcast. We're getting ready to go on almost 2 years on the MrMaple Show podcast. But I've sat here and edited, and I've listened to a lot of people talk about Japanese maples and conifers. And when I go through Talon's writings, I still am learning new things that other people haven't discussed. He's just a wealth of knowledge.
Well, y'all, you can always support this channel by shopping with MrMaple.com. And if maybe your garden's full, we have a merch store on MrMaple.com as well. So you can check out our hats, our t-shirts. And we just appreciate all y'all so much for all you do to help us keep talking about Japanese maples because that's what we love doing. We're jumping in to the Collector's Corner today. So Sean and I developed some different topics, and we're basically choosing a cultivar that we're going to talk about each one of us under each of those topics.
Absolutely. This is going to be fun. You want to go ahead and jump right in?
Yeah. What do you have for our first topic? Our first topic is Linerlobum. That's the strap-leaf Japanese maple.
So we were talking a second ago about Talon Buckholz. So I've got a Talon Buckholz introduction, Yellow Threads.
Oh, you got a good one.
Oh, it's great. And I know you with the yellow color, so it gets those yellow colors. But this one, to me, it's a little different than some of the other ones, just the way that it reaches. To me, it seems like it's a little bit more vigorous of a grower for the Linerlobums. And with that yellow color, the texture of it, that you can pair it with almost any other maple out there in your landscape, it's just gonna show.
Yeah, I mean, I like Yellow Threads too. I mean, Yellow Threads is a newer selection by Talon. It's one of my more favorite of his newer introductions. It has a nice V shape as it grows, so it pairs very well with something like a Villa Toronto that's going to have similar leaves but different colors on those leaves. And Yellow Threads just rocks it out in the garden, given that brighter yellow color. I know we actually captured it on camera for a cultivar highlight over at my parents' place. When the sunlight was hitting it, you could actually see the yellow so well. And that's one of the things about Yellow Threads. It's so dynamic in the landscape and garden. It can really go some nice shades of oranges and pink reds in the fall. I mean, for a Linerlobum, it is a game changer because it's one of the first more yellow selections of a Linerlobum.
And I just love it. I've seen it, been to, everybody knows the ultimate maple collector, Brian Rule. At his house, he has it paired next to a pumpkill. And it just, like I say, again, that yellow, and then you put it next to something like that with that darker, that red kind of purple color. It's a showstopper.
Yeah, I mean, I I'm in love with that plant. Yellow threads, just because the linerlobums add so much to the garden. They give this bamboo essence. They give this open, airy feel. And yellow threads does that in a very different way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very attracted to that. Since you chose yellow threads, I'm going to have to choose something that's not yellow because there's not another more yellow selection of the linerlobums. So I'm going to go with another Buchholz introduction. I'm going to go with Acer palmatum fairy hair. And this is a tree that, we've had a challenge at really growing it well here, but at the Buchholz farm, they're some of the biggest fairy hairs in the world. It needs really good drainage that we've learned. And it has one of the thinnest leaves of any of the linerlobum selections. It just looks like little thin hairs on a tree. And it's probably the most linerlobum of any of the Japanese maples.
You know what I like about that is that, so the last time I was out there at the Buchholz farm was fall. And for something you talk about, one of the thinnest, that thing puts out fall color like nothing else.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it can give you some cherry red colors in the fall that are outrageous. For many of y'all, if you're a first-time listener, we actually purchased Buchholz Nursery last year. We had a big whole Buchholz week where we got excited because, we actually purchased Buchholz Nursery. And so now we've got a wholesale nursery that ships to garden centers and specialty nurseries all across America. And that's based out of Gaston, Oregon. And if, you fit one of those niche garden centers, contact Buchholz Nursery about becoming a wholesale customer today. But fairy hair is one of those plants that everybody's after because there's nothing else quite like it. It's a slow grower. Talon boasts that, when they had the extreme high heats in Portland area, that many of his other trees showed burn, but his fairy hairs in the ground did not. And it's a tree that in the Pacific Northwest has really proven to be extremely durable for when they have a temperature extremes. For me, it's just a very unique tree. And when it comes to linerlobums, it is exceptional. I mean, when you have those thin fairy-like hairs on the tree, I'm not so sure about the name of it, but it is a rock star in the garden.
So what do you have so our next category is Makawa variant. So can't say Makawa Yatsubusa, but it's got to be a variant. What you got for that?
Well, since there are no real yellow Makawa variants yet, and I go first, I can't choose a yellow. I'm going to choose probably one of the customer favorites right now, which is Snow Kitten or Yukiyama.
Ooh.
Or Yamayuki or Elmer, whichever name you want to go by. It is a Makawa Yatsubusa with a Rideno Nishiki style-like variegation to it. I do recommend pruning Snow Kitten so that it continues to put on lots of variegation to it. Just like a Rideno Nishiki, it throws most of the variegation on the new growth. So a 1 and a 2 gallon, a Welsh pot, they're going to look very variegated. If you're not pruning on that tree in the landscape and garden, it's going to get more green. It's still going to show variegation, but it's not going to be as variegated as if you pruned on it.
And I've seen that we've had questions that have come in and people ask, why is the Snow Kitten on a standard? You're used to, we have the lollipop Makawas and stuff like that, but we're used to seeing most of those as a low graph. And I've seen that question come in, and talking to, Brian and talking to you and Matt, that is one where it's on that standard graft because you need that airflow. You want that airflow to really help. It really helps the growth of it and the shape of it and the health of it overall.
This is one that Talon Buchholz was really getting in production because it is something that's different from what's out there. I mean, it has that tile layering habit that everybody loves with Makawa Yatsubusa. I mean, what's more hot right now in the nursery industry than a Makawa Yatsubusa Japanese maple? And this is a variegated form of it. And people are going crazy over it. But by raising it up, you get that airflow underneath it. And this is what Talon Buchholz says to do. And so was one of the reasons we've been producing a lot of the Snow Kittens at Buchholz Nursery by doing this high graft, this lollipop-like effect for Snow Kitten. But again, Snow Kitten is a Makawa Yatsubusa, so it's a dwarf, and it's variegated. So you want to make sure you give these things good drainage. And you think about this, you may have a Makawa Yatsubusa beside of this, and you think, yeah, I want to have Makawa Yatsubusa have good drainage too because it is a dwarf. It is a slow grower. But when you look at Snow Kitten, it needs even better drainage than the Makawi Etsubusa. So keep this in mind when you get those variegations. That means that it's going to be a little bit slower grower, and overwatering is a high possibility on some of these variegated dwarfs.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, Snow Kitten, to me, it's one of those plants that it's going to be hard to produce enough of, because the demand for this is thousands and thousands and thousands of trees. We're producing 500 to 1,000 at Buckholz every year right now, trying to amp it up. And it's crazy because if you go check out some of our YouTube videos where we've like shocking trees at Buckholz Nursery, you see some of our stock plants that we're continually pruning on, and you see how crazy variegated Snow Kitten can be if you're giving it a pruning. We've got some 3s and 7 gallons out there that are just, I mean, literally my mom, when she went out there to Buckholz Nursery, her jaw dropped because she saw how beautiful they looked.
I had to laugh. Yesterday, we had a tour group come in, 3 tour buses pulled in, and I would figure maybe about 150 people came by. And I see this lady walking, and I say, "You got yourself a Snow Kitten." She probably found the last one we had available for sale hidden somewhere from open house that we recently just had. And she was just over the moon for finding the Snow Kitten, and she was not letting it go.
Now, that means that we had 2 days of open house, and we had enough Snow Kittens to go around. Is that not crazy?
Insane.
We had enough Snow Kittens that there was a 2 days of open house and a Snow Kitten left at the end of the open house. That means that we're starting to finally get these trees in numbers. And that's the thing, people were saying the other day that when we dropped koi, they said, "I finally got koi." It's, it was on the website for an hour. They couldn't believe it. It's because we're able to drop larger and larger sets. And that's our goal, is to make it easy for you to get these hard and rare and hard to get trees for your garden.
And that's one of the most common questions that we get on any of our social media channels is, when is this tree coming back? When it's coming back. So don't fret. Anything you see, if it sells out, it will be back.
So I guess I'm going to give you the next topic first. What do you have for your best yellow Japanese maple? Or not even best, when you think of yellow and Japanese maple, what do you think of?
So for me, and it was really just this year that I've jumped on the train, but Summer Gold.
Oh, you stole mine.
I stole it, but and really what did it for me was that I was looking for something for a particular place in the garden, in the landscape, that I knew would give the color, texture, but also stand up to the heat and the sun. And I know that everyone was saying Summer Gold, Summer Gold, Summer Gold. And the moment I got a Summer Gold, it lives up to what everyone says. It takes a beating. It takes it, and it just shows strong. It doesn't show the burn like other ones do, and the color texture, and then also the red border you get on it early on. It's just, I can't say anything but good about Summer Gold.
Yeah, Summer Gold, it's a sister seedling to Jordan. It is a very heat tolerant, probably one of the more heat tolerant besides Hot Blonde, which we talked about in the last Collector's Corner. It pairs with everything. And that's the thing I love saying is, hey, put this in the garden and pair it with the Summer Gold, because it truly does bring out all the colors in the garden. It can go in the sun, and it can be the intense, fiery, intense, bright yellow. And then you put it in a more shaded situation, and it's still a yellow-green that brightens up the darker spots in the garden. So it can be used in so many different ways. And that's the thing I love about Summer Gold. It was a selection by Fratelli Ghirardelli Nursery in Italy. And they introduced some classics. And since you picked Summer Gold, we talked about Hot Blonde in the last Collector's Corner. I'm going to bring up Orange Dream, which is another selection by Fratelli Ghirardelli Nursery. But it's really one of the OG yellows. Arium, you got Acer Shirasautum Arium, which is one of the first yellows. But then when it comes to a Palmatum that's a yellow, Orange Dream is dreamy in the garden. Puts in a lot of yellow.
I actually, I think that is a underrated tree. I don't think it gets the right respect that it gets. That I think a lot of people, because of Summer Gold and Jordan out there, I think a lot of people overlook that.
I would agree. You look at all their introductions, and people put Fire Glow in the garden every single day. Summer Gold is becoming super popular, but Orange Dream has been a classic that everyone has used for years. And if you take Orange Dream and push it into a little bit of sunlight, you get that bleached out effect that makes Orange Dream so spectacular, because you have the yellow color with bleached yellow on there as well. You got to play with it though, because it can't handle full sun. You're going to need to give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun, but if you can give it 2 p.m. and some 12 to 2 p.m. somewhere in there, some sunlight, that bleached out effect can really add to a new dynamic that you don't get on many Japanese maples.
Absolutely. So this next topic, to me, I think is fun because we talk so much about maples. So this is your favorite non-maple. What's your favorite non-maple?
I'm going to go with Clethra barbonervis Takeda Nishiki.
That's a mouthful right there.
Yeah, it's a Japanese Clethra that was found by Takeda-san in Japan's largest main island, which is Shikoku, and it was found in the wild. So you can get, the straight species, Clethra barbonervis. That's something that they often use in the landscape. But Takeda Nishiki was found in the wild as a variegated form of that. And so you get splotched variegation on a Japanese Clethra.
And it holds that variegation all the whole time, right? Like you don't ever really lose that variegation.
Yeah, I mean, it's got some amazing colors on there with the white on the green, and the fall it goes to pink and red. Clethra barbonervis is an amazing plant in the first place because the bark can look like a crepe myrtle almost. I mean, you can get some really nice red bark to it that gives this extra distinguishing characteristic. And then it's got this elongated bloom that is really nice. And it's one of the reasons why people use Clethra barbonervis in the first place. And then you add that variegation on top. You've got a killer plant that's a winner that you can put out there in shaded spots with a little bit of sun, and it's going to rock it out.
What I also like is that we talked about the variegation and the colors, but the foliage shape really adds a texture difference in the landscape as well. If you pair it up against something else, just the shape of the leaves just does wonders.
Yeah, and variegation can brighten up those dark spots in the garden. One fun thing to do if you've got a shady garden is to make a variegated garden. You put a bunch of cool variegated plants of all different types, Japanese maples, Clethra, red oaks. I mean, everything you can think of with variegation. We've got a lot of cool plants on MrMaple.com if you go shop our other cool rare plant section. We've got a rare plant section that just has a lot of things that you don't find elsewhere. And a lot of times they're variegated.
Absolutely. And, like we say, this section is non-maple. There is so much stuff that you can pair with maples that just brightens the garden. Again, we talk a lot about how gardens in your landscape, you should have performance, and it's kind of like a symphony or a song. You should always have something happening at some point. That's why you look at coral barks. You got something happening during winter. This is just another example of something great to pair in your garden to give you that symphony, to give you something happening at a different moment.
All right, Sean. So what do you have for your non-maple?
So my non-maple is the oak leaf hydrangea Little Honey.
You chose a yellow non-maple.
No.
Man, you're beating me to it. You outthought me on my yellows.
So, to be honest with you, when it comes to hydrangeas, oak leaf has always been my favorite type of hydrangea. You just get those big leaves, and then the Little Honey, you get those big, almost white cone-like flowers on it, which is beautiful in itself. And you get these big yellow leaves. But honestly, what I love about Little Honey is that its foliage seems to be thicker than most other hydrangeas. And because of that, and I'll have to go through my pictures, but this hydrangea, the oak leaf, this will give some Japanese maples a run for its money when it comes to fall color. This is a hydrangea where those leaves will change colors. You'll get reds, you'll get oranges. The first time I had one, and the one that I have in our garden, the first fall, I was just amazed. I said, some of these maples better catch up, better do something, because this fall color on this hydrangea is just as killer.
Yeah, the oak leaf hydrangeas are known for being some of the best fall color plants in the garden. Japanese maples, obviously, that's what people think of when they think of fall color. But if you're thinking for a blooming plant like a hydrangea, I mean, the oak leaf hydrangeas they're the clear winners when it comes to hydrangeas on the fall color. And Little Honey, the dynamic contrast from the yellow that you get to the orange red kind of fall color, those burgundies, those deep reds, those bright reds, it's starkly different from the yellow leaves. And because of that, it's a rock star. Now, Little Honey is one of those plants, again, you want to give it good drainage. If it's in an area that's too wet, it may have a hard time trying to get established. For me, Little Honey is a plant that I can't do enough of because I love it. And that when it's a plant that I love, I know other people are going to love it too. Again, hitting that yellow theme, I think some of my yellow dances might be rubbing off on you.
I think it has. I think the yellow is really rubbing off. Well, when you think about yellow in the landscape, though, forever, you never really had that yellow contrast against everything. I mean, you had stuff here and there. You had blooms that could be yellow. But when it comes to foliage, you never really had a plethora of plants to throw into a landscape in a garden to give you that contrast. Of course, you have red, you have green, but that yellow in the landscape can give you depth and just texture that you wouldn't have otherwise.
All right, guys, so our next category is dwarf. And I'm going to go off with this, and I'm going to say Scarlet Princess. So not what you typically think of as a dwarf, but this is a dwarf witch's broom mutation. Our good friend Bob McCafferty calls them blessings. I like that quite a bit. And it's because these witch's brooms are blessings. They're a dwarf mutation that happens, and if you take a graft off of it, then it is a dwarfer version of the tree above. But there actually can be some characteristics that change on a witch's broom from its parent. Scarlet Princess was found by Tom and Nancy Ash as a witch's broom on the cultivar Crimson Queen, which many of y'all may have in your garden. But Scarlet Princess is more dense, compact, and has a funnier shape. It starts out kind of upright, and then it goes kind of weeping, and then overall it creates kind of this ball shape with a lace leaf. So it's one of the very few witch's brooms on a lace leaf. There's a one Bob McCafferty found on ornatum. There's there's baby lace that was found on ornatum as well. And both of those I've had a hard time keeping alive, but Scarlet Princess has been hardy and durable and an easy tree for me to grow.
So what I like about this is that there are differences, and the colors that it goes to in the fall. You've got Crimson Queen, which is more of that crimson color, but this one, it really gives you that scarlet color in the landscape.
And it can give you a little cherry or red color in the spring. I think some of our photos show that than I've ever seen Crimson Queen go to. The other thing that I find unique about this is, for me, Crimson Queen isn't a very sun-tolerant plant, but Scarlet Princess has proven to be more sun-tolerant than Crimson Queen was. And you often wonder about what a witch's broom mutation actually does. Is it a change in genetics, or is it a change in showing the genetics that are there? Because it's one of these things where you start to see so many different things start to change on a plant, and you really wonder, well, how is this more heat tolerant? How is this showing a different shade of red than the parent plant does? It's got to be something that's happening on the molecular level. And we've got a full podcast, too, on what is a witch's broom. And we sort of talk about some of our theories. We've talked to Billy Schwartz and the Billy Schwartz experience about his theories on witch's brooms. You should go check some of those out. For me, I love these dwarf mutations that you find. I love these things that just give you a dwarf or more compact form to use in the garden. They're useful. They're beautiful. They fit in containers. And where the landscape is always shrinking. So the more dwarf mutations we can find, the more exciting it seems like people who are in these smaller gardens can enjoy their garden.
So my choice for a dwarf is a Rhode Island Red. And the reason I chose Rhode Island Red, the first time I came across Rhode Island Red, I wasn't overly impressed. But then I started thinking about, well, you know what? I have this space in my garden that I want, but I want that traditional blood good red color leaf shape style, but I don't have the space for a blood good. So then I said, well, let's do Rhode Island Red. And then actually having Rhode Island Red, y'all, this thing is a tank. And for me, I go back to one of Talon's in his blog when he's talking about botany. He says, well, you know, my problem with botany is I'm just too lazy. And sometimes I could be guilty of that laziness takes over. And within a garden, sometimes you want something that you know that you're not just going to, You don't want something you're going to struggle with. You don't want something that's going to die on you, you're going to have issues with. I'll tell you what, Rhode Island Red brings it. It's tough as nails. It's heat tolerant. It's sun tolerant. And then also, it being a dwarf, I've seen people, we have a customer that has, I'll say a good size, but has a Rhode Island Red in a container next to their pool. So they're bringing it up to their pool. So you're talking about the radiant heat from the water shining off, the reflection, radiant heat from the concrete around the pool. And this thing is a tank. You get that classic blood good look in your garden in a smaller, rounder shape. That's just killer. You can do it in containers. You can have it in the ground. It's just gonna blow you away.
Now, yeah, I agree 1,000%. That's what happens. Is it's the tree that everyone's been looking for. I mean, they find a blood good or a blood good seedling or a red Japanese maple, and then they take hedge trimmers and try to turn it into the shape that Rhode Island Red does naturally. The difference is that Rhode Island Red looks like a beautiful tree when it's in leaf, when it's out of leaf, and then you look at those trees that they've pruned with hedge pruners out of leaf, and it looks like a disaster. We call them maple massacres. And Rhode Island Red is exactly the tree that they've all been looking for. They just should have started out with that. Then they should have started out with that beautiful shape tree rather than the tree they're trying to turn a large upright into. Now, being a mail order nursery, we used to see every single package that was shipping out through MrMaple, and we've gotten so busy now that a lot of that goes to our team managers and our team leaders that are on staff on the shipping side of things, because we're busy doing podcasts, YouTube videos, walking around, checking to see how the trees are growing, figuring out which sets are ready to get listed next. And, that often happens. And then we don't realize when sometimes celebrities order trees from us. Summer Rain Oaks, who came and visited our nursery not long ago, she did some feature of our nursery, and we were honored and privileged. But she actually bought a Rhode Island Red from us, and it was her first Japanese maple she'd bought from MrMaple, mail order. And it's because she loves Rhode Island Red chickens. And she had a Rhode Island Red chicken that was featured in many of her YouTube videos. And Summer Rain Oaks was just a blast to have here. We've actually talked to her before about possibly coming doing a podcast with us about how things got started. And it's interesting that she really loves that Rhode Island Red as well. I mean, not just because the chicken side of things, she loved just the dwarf dense compact habit of it. It's a selection that was found by Rhode Island Nursery as a dense dwarf red, and it's just changed the industry when people are looking for those dwarf blood good types. And you'll see people selling seedlings all the time that say dwarf blood good. That doesn't mean anything. There's not a dwarf blood good, but there is Rhode Island Red, which has a leaf like a blood good and has a dwarf habit, and that's really what people want.
Absolutely. So now we are moving on to reticulated ghost-like. What do you got?
So I'm going to go with Amagi Shiguri. I know that I talk about a lot of other plants, and so I want to keep things fresh. But Amagi Shiguri is a selection that happened in Japan, and Talon Buchholz actually sent us, the write-up that the person who introduced it said. It says, "Here's this tree. Here's some photos of it. Here's why I introduced it." And we've got that in one of our videos about Amagi Shiguri. You can go check that out. But Amagi Shiguri just gives some unreal colors. It gives some purple colors. And then if you give this tree some shade, you get some metallic kind of greens in there. And with purpley color, but kind of green, kind of silver. And so you can play with this tree. So put it in a container and figure out where you like it better. Do you like it with a little more sunlight where it gets more of those lavender shades, or do you like it in the shade where it gets some of those more metallic colors? I know Brian Rule is a big fan of moving this towards the shade to get some of those more metallic colors. But the thing I like about it being reticulated ghost-like, it's one of the smaller growing selections in that style. I know that we collected some seeds on it at Buchholz Nursery off of some giant 10, 12 foot Amagi Shiguris. That's not typical. Typically, we're talking about a 4 to 5 feet tree, 4 to 5 foot wide in 10 years. And so it has this nice semi-arching habit. To me, it's a rock star.
So I had to, and part of it's a little bit, the name of it. I'm a guitarist from Memphis, and, You know, we had a famous blues player that hit the streets there and named his guitar this. So, you know, there might be some of that, but mine, I have to go with with Sweet Lucille, the variegation on that. And, you know, there's so many that Talon put out. This is not a Talon Buckholz. This is not part of the Ghost series. This is not part of the new Ghost series. This is a Crispin Silva introduction, and I believe it goes under, there's the other name, the something fingers. Skeleton's Reach. There you go. But this thing, holy cow, the first time I saw this going through a greenhouse, the white variegation, and no disrespect to Talon, but this tree gives some of his Ghost series trees a run for its money when it comes to that variegation.
I like it because it's so dynamic. You got the creamy white outside, you get the green that's just stark, and it's there. I mean, you see the green veins that are just outstanding, that just grab your attention. And for a plant named Sweet Lucille, I think about Matt and I. Matt got us tickets to one of the Biltmore House summer concert series, and B.B. King came out there, and he broke out Sweet Lucille and, you know, was out there playing some amazing blues. And that's what I think about when I see Sweet Lucille. I'm like, man, this thing's got a cool name, an homage to, you know, some cool blues, and a tree that if you give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun, put it in more of those shadier spots, you're going to get some really outrageous, reticulated, ghost-like variegations.
It really does. Like I say, the first time I saw it walking through those greenhouses, I stopped in my tracks to say, what is this? Because my first thought was that it was part of the Ghost series. I was thinking, like, what is this? Is there another Ghost I'm unaware of? And looking at it, I mean, it just pops.
So our next topic we got is upright. What do you have for upright?
So I've got Twombly's Red Sentinel. What I like about this is that it's an upright, and this breaks the rules because it's a witch's broom, and most of the time when you think of witch's broom, you think of small, compact. But this thing gets upright and columnar, and I always have this idea, like, think of an old English garden. Your entrance in, you can use Twombly's Red Sentinel as that upright, columnar tree entering into the garden. I just think it's killer. It's heat tolerant. You've got those classic red Japanese maple colors. I mean, it's just a cultivar it's just a hitter.
I mean, I often wondered if it was a mutation found on Fireglow, because there's been some other mutations found on Fireglow that were a bud sport-like broom that ended up having narrow shapes. But the colors of Twombly's Red Sentinel are reminiscent of what you see in Fireglow. You see cherry or red colors. You get some glowing effects when the sunlight hits it. You get maroons during the summer, some really good fall color. And it's so easy to use out in the landscape and garden. You know, often people will write their descriptions on their website based on what they read on Mr. Maple. You know, we read through all the books, but we also call the people who introduce these plants. Like, I called Ken Twombly and I said, hey, you know, this is a cool plant. How did you find it? And he said, I found it as a witch's broom mutation, and I grafted it. And, you know, for the longest time, I thought it was going to be a ball shape, kind of like Shayna. And then one day I was out there looking in the garden, and it looked like a sentinel. And that's how it became Twombly's Red Sentinel. And it was interesting because he said that a lot of people in Connecticut, where, you know, he's at, are even starting to use this as a deciduous shrub border. So they'll plant these really tight together, like you would say something like a DeGroot spire or an emerald green arborvitae, but you get the colors of a Japanese maple in the spring, summer, and the fall. And so that's just a unique way to grow this. And it's interesting whenever it comes to plants like that. You get those origin stories. It just adds something extra that you don't find many places. It's always good to go to the source to try to get this information, or you can come to the Mr. Maple podcast. There you go.
And also, like you said, that you can, Twombly's Red Sentinel is something that you could use in place of a different type of tree that for its purpose that you would otherwise use.
Yeah, I mean, you can put this tree on the corner of a house. You can put this tree flanking both sides of the garden as you walk in for a traditional English style garden. It's such a fun tree to add that vertical interest. You've got whole videos on YouTube talking about adding vertical interest in the garden, and Twombly's does that in a phenomenal way.
Absolutely. So what do you have?
Well, for my upright, I chose Acer Saccharum Monumental, sometimes called Temple's Upright. This is one of the most narrow growing selections of any maple. It's slow growing sugar maple, so it grows in a lot of zones that, it can grow in a zone 3, being a sugar maple. Extremely cold tolerant. I wouldn't really tap it for sugar though, but it is one of those trees that fits in a small place in the garden and gives you a lot of vertical interest. I think about a specimen that I saw as a kid going and visiting Gristmill Landscaping in Maryland, and Bob just had this amazing monumental, and we're talking 25, 30 feet tall, and I was just in awe of it. I was like, this is amazing. And it's cool because now I've got monumental here that has grown fairly large down at the bottom of the nursery. And I've got some large ones at Buckholz Nursery that we just purchased. And it's so cool just to walk through and be like, I own that amazing tree. And, that's not even the trees we talk about. We talk about the Macawi Etabusa, the S Sunset, all these awesome plants. But monumental just has this really narrow shape. And we're talking about a 20, 30-foot tree that's no more than 2.5, 3 foot wide. I mean, that is dynamic. You look at it and you think upright. That's what I think of when I think of Acer Saccharum Monumental.
Oh, absolutely. And you talking about that one out at Buckholz, you sit there and you just keep going and going and going, lifting your head up all the way. And you're like, is that for real? It's for real.
So next up, our topic we got is from Japan. And I'm going to go with one that was found near Nikko National Park when Matt and I went to Japan. Our very first trip to Japan, Matt and I, we drove 3,000 miles. We got a rental car and we drove. And the first thing we drove up to Nikko National Park, and it was National Sports Day. And we didn't know what that meant. It was a celebration of when Japan hosted the Olympics. And as we're driving up to Nikko National Park, apparently that's where everybody was going on their day off from work. And most people would be like grumpy, because, you're sitting in traffic, but you're going through a national park. And so you're getting to stare slowly at Stordia pseudocamellia, Japanese maples, all this Japanese native flora. And it's just spectacular because some of this stuff was really cool and was starting fall color. Really exciting. We loved it so much on the end of the trip, we drove back up to Nikko National Park and got things in a deeper fall color, which was amazing. But Seki no Kigon is a Seboldianum that was found near there, and it was named after a waterfall there. Growing in the wild, over 100 years old, 10 foot by 10 foot, heavily weeping habit. It just twists and undulates almost like a Germain's gyration with a full moon style leaf, and the fall colors on it are yellows, oranges, and reds. I saw it in a Maple Society newsletter shortly after we got it here in America, and they were talking about how it was just released in Japan. And it's cool because somebody that we knew had actually brought it back from Japan, and we got it before it was ever released in Japan itself, which is awesome. But it's a game changer when it comes to full moon maples because it's got that weeping habit, a unique style leaf. It's just a rock star.
So from Japan, I had to go with, to me, I consider it a classic. It's the parent plant to a lot of other cultivars to come after it, but Ryusen.
Ryusen, Ryusei. That's an awesome plant.
So when we went to Texas this summer, I think of Cindy Bull's Ryusen that she has in her personal garden, and the way she had it staked up and the way it came down and just drooped. It looked like a green cousin from the Addams Family.
On that first trip to Japan we talked about earlier, we actually got to go visit Kobayashi Momiji, who introduced Ryusen, Ryusei as they call it in Japan. And it's one of those plants that they have what they call like the original Ryusen. And really what it is it's a upright tree that they've high grafted a lot of Ryusens into. And so it's basically created this monster Ryusen that's unlike anything else that you've seen. And it's sort of the center point to their garden because Ryusen is their nursery's probably one of their most famous introductions to date. And it's good reason why. I mean, it is heat tolerant. It's vigorous. It's got a good, strong weeping habit. It's got a good fall color. And everything about it makes it fun to use in the garden. You know what it's going to do. It's going to have this heavily cascading habit. Well, that means you can stake it up to as tall as you want, let it weep down, create this fountain-like effect. You can let it just grow as a ground cover. You can put it in a hanging basket. You can actually train this thing across a trellis, as they've done at Kobayashi Momiji. They even had it growing as a topsy-turvy, where they had it coming from the bottom of the pot, going straight down. As years go on, they'll actually take it, flip it over, and it looks like every branch is naturally staked. I mean, so many cool things you can do with Ryusa and Ryusei. We actually have some of the trees from Brian Upchurch when we bought his place that are actually brought over before it ever got patented. So Brian had actually had it over before it came across and got patented later. But it is an amazing, amazing plant. To me, I like it because it's got a different feel. I mean, it's one of the first trees with that heavily cascading habit, but that palmate leaf. And so it's got a different texture than you would think of a typical lace leaf, because it is different. And its habit, the only thing that can come close to it in the lace leaf world is orangeola. I mean, it's just so strongly weeping that it's fun, it's exciting, and it grows fast, making it a production plant for many nurseries.
So now we're moving on to your first Japanese maple. For me, my first Japanese maple, so from my background with landscape design and installation, a lot of customers would be like, I want a Japanese maple. Okay, what do you want? But then coming to work at MrMaple and going through, this tree caught my eye because I said, there's no way this is a Japanese maple. But it's one of the oldest, it's one of the toughest, is Shishi Shigira.
Yeah, Shishi Shigira is amazing. That is a classic.
There's no way, like I say, the first time I saw it, there's no way this is a Japanese maple. But this thing, the fall color, the kind of the tight layering of its leaves, it's kind of the crinkling of its leaves, and then the fact that I could put it in the shade, I can put it in the sun, I could put it in clay dirt. The thing's gonna grow, and a common theme for me as a gardener is I don't always want to have to work hard to make something grow and be successful at it. Shishi is one of those that you don't have to go far beyond to be successful with this tree.
So while we're talking about your first Japanese maple, I'm remembering your first interview for a job here at MrMaple. You applied for office manager.
I did.
And at the time we had somebody that we thought fit the role better, but I saw Sean and I was like, his landscaping background and this dude looks like he can work. I was like, we need to keep this guy on staff. So we said, hey, would you mind coming and being part of our crew that works outside, not necessarily our office manager? And Sean was excited. But how many years has it been now?
So we're 4 years now. We'll be getting ready to go on 5.
That's crazy. 5 years. I mean, it flies so fast because at the time, Matt and I were just beginning to grow our nursery. We were just beginning to let our nursery expand. And that meant that Matt and I couldn't do everything anymore. And so we had to hire people that were responsible, people that could jump in and learn a lot of the jobs that we were doing to make this place better and make this place grow so that we could provide more Japanese maples for y'all. For more Japanese maples mail order, we could do things with better quality. And you've been a big part of that, Sean. And
well, I appreciate that.
I really appreciate all you've done. My first Japanese maple was Acer palmatum Inaba Shidari. Dad got it years ago. It's one of the first trees I grafted. A classic red Japanese maple, one of our favorite red lace leaves because it did so well in the heat. And for me, it was a red lace leaf that could grow fast, but could handle the heat for Columbia, South Carolina. In the early days, Columbia was our super high heat area. I mean, now we've got a lot of customers in Dallas-Fort Worth area, but oddly enough, Columbia can actually get close to some of those Dallas-Fort Worth heat index ratings that they get down there in Texas. And for us, this was a tree that many people could grow down in Columbia. enjoy some great spring color. Yes, it's going to go to more green red during the summer, but it can give you a good fall color too. Vigorous and really durable. And when I think about the first Japanese maple, that's what I think about is a Nabashidari.
What I like about it is that I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a purple tree, but there's a time in the year where it almost comes across like it's a purple tree.
That's so true. I mean, you can see that in our cultivar highlight we did in Mom and Dad's garden, and it's the one that starts off with Carolina, Matt's oldest daughter, saying, Anobi Shidobi. It's the cutest thing ever. It's awesome that we caught that. She's trying to introduce the cultivar, but you can actually see that purple color in that cultivar highlight. And, those colors aren't edited. We're not going through there changing the color contrast on the tree. That's what it really looked like in the spring after a rain. And it can give you some really nice shades of purple that you don't get on many of the lace leaves.
Absolutely. Wow. So this next topic, I like being a musician, playing guitar, most rock and roll. What you got?
Well, when we were throwing some topics together, I thought we got to throw most rock and roll in here because you're in a Southern rock and roll band.
Southern rock and roll. Yeah.
Yeah. And y'all have got some killer singles out there.
Oh, thank you.
And some killer songs. And whenever I'm listening to them, I'm like, man, this is awesome. I mean, if you listen to the riffs for our podcast, that's Sean. He's one of our rock and roll. Jess is also in the band. His wife, Kate, is also in the band. And, recently we just added Trevor too, who's another rock and roll guru.
Yep.
So it's cool that we've got so many people who are so skilled. I know y'all have played at one of our open houses before. And it's hard to have you play the open houses because
we're not out there to help anyone.
Not out there to help all the customers.
Plants and help customers.
Yeah.
Yep.
But for most rock and roll, I had to really think about this. And then I had to think about trees that I haven't talked about yet in one of these collector's corners. And so I chose Gable's Glory.
Ooh, very nice.
And when I think about Gable's Glory, I think about the dynamics that you see. I mean, that's what rock and roll is. You've got some soft, and then also you've got some really nice riffs that come in there. You've got some, and that's what we're seeing here with Gable's Glory, is you've got some pink-red colors maturing to yellow with pink-red colors coming across that. Sometimes you get some maroons in there, some metallic-y colors on there. Metallic pink. That's what I think about when I think about the new growth on Gable's Glory. So I was like, rock and roll. That one's sometimes called the chameleon maple, and we didn't term that. I mean, that's something that someone else came up out in the world, and people started calling it chameleon maple because it changes colors unlike anything else. And to me, it's a tree that was found by Larry Gable. I think it made its way mostly through the nursery trade through Del Laux of Laux Nursery, who, also that nursery gave us Lillian's Jewel, that gave us Emerald Lace, that gave us some classics. Gable's Glory is one of those trees that a nice upright habit and color changes throughout the season that just continue to impress me.
So when you said that, how about this topic of most rock and roll? I had to think about that as well. And so when I think of rock and roll, I think of it's all about the show. Let's go to the show. It's about the show. And we get a lot of, we've done a lot of talking about Firefly. But, there's one that it's a Talon Buckles introduction, Celebration, that I believe can give Firefly a challenge when it comes to putting on a show, changing all season long. Celebration, the way that you get those pink new spring growth, then you start to get that variegate with that white variegation as the leaf starts to turn green. And as that's happening, you now have new growth on top of that that's shooting out, that's red and pink. It's always putting on a show. So when I think of a Japanese maple that's rock and roll, Celebration all the way.
That's hard to beat. I mean, I think about that when I start thinking about, so every time I see Celebration, I think about celebrate good times.
Good times. Let's go.
And it's such an amazing plant. To me, it's one of the most pink-red reticulated styles that you can get in the trade. Like, it's hard to describe the colors that it goes through, and then the new growth fleshes in the summer return to some amazing colors. It's one of my favorite of Talon Buckles' introductions.
Same here.
And it's one of his new selections. I mean, it's fairly new in the trade, but yet it's really gotten out there. And one of the reasons it really got out there is early on, we actually bought some of Talon Buckholtz's stock plants as soon as he listed them. And then we grafted the hound out of it because we realized how special Celebration was. And it's interesting because when we bought Buckholtz Nursery, we were like, oh, where's all the stock plants of Celebration? It was like, oh yeah, we bought most of them. But we've got some cool plants, some good stock plants out there now. And, really umping up the production on Celebration because it's a tree that everybody needs to have. It's a color unlike you find in any other Japanese maple. So y'all, this was today's Collector's Corner. We appreciate y'all jumping into this podcast. We also have a YouTube component to this that has photos with each of these cultivars as well, so you can check that out on YouTube. It's the MrMaple Show there on YouTube. Sean, I appreciate you jumping in today's Collector's Corner. It's always fun to talk plants and always fun to talk plants with friends.
I appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun. It's a little bit more challenging when, you have these, what's your favorite of this? It's not that easy because some of these, depending on what time of the year, could change. But thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
So y'all, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with all your gardening friends. If you know somebody who loves Japanese maples, make sure they find our podcast. They're going to really enjoy it just like you are. We work hard to put out weekly content here on the podcast, daily content on our YouTube show, and we're always upping up what we're doing on MrMaple.com. You can always check us out there and subscribe to our weekly emails.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.